Anonymous donor sperm has helped many Australian families have children. But exactly who and how many have been conceived in clinics like this, nobody knows. Are there any records recording who donor children are in Australia and how many there are? And you're not concerned about that?
No, not particularly, no.
This man has no idea how many children he's helped create. He donated sperm more than 300 times. So you're not concerned about any of your own offspring meeting and having a relationship?
Yeah, you would be a bit concerned, I suppose.
But what is the impact on children conceived with anonymous donor sperm? These sisters went on a 20-year hunt to find their donor father. What they found shocked them.
He got upset and a bit irate and said, "Don't be ridiculous," and screamed at me and said goodbye. Finding your grassroots gives you meaning in life, and every child deserves their right to know where they came from.
What do you think the motivation is for donor-conceived children wanting to find out about their donor biological dads?
Oh, in this day and age, everybody's got to know everything about everything.
Tonight on Four Corners, anonymous donor sperm conception. A gift of life or a social experiment gone wrong? Sally McGreal's about to leave on a 3-hour road trip from Melbourne to Albury, just over the border in New South Wales. Her mission to buy anonymous donor sperm so she can have a second child. She's part of a growing movement of single women and lesbian couples using a stranger's semen to conceive.
I just couldn't see myself without children, and I thought that was all part of what we're supposed to be doing while we're here. Yeah, Bridge, come on. That's it. Sit you in there, good girl. Whoops.
Sally McGreal's forced to travel interstate. In Victoria, only heterosexual couples or infertile women are allowed to access anonymous donor sperm from a fertility clinic.
Sally was in that situation not knowing a known donor, so she was forced to go interstate. So we talked a bit about which clinics were available, how she might be able to get there, and she was preferring to drive to the clinic, so Albury seemed to be the most useful avenue for her.
Two years ago, Sally McGreal realised she wasn't going to meet a man she could have a family with. And at the age of 39, her biological clock was ticking, so she decided to go it alone. A hairdresser with her own business and house, she could afford to raise a child. Sally McGreal was very lucky. After only her second visit to Albury, she fell pregnant with Bridget. Why did you decide to use anonymous donor sperm? Did you ever consider someone you knew, a friend or...?
Yeah, that many people had suggested that, but that's not my way of doing things. Personally, I couldn't ask that of a friend.
As a result, Bridget probably will never know her biological father. Her mother chose him from a handful of men. She was given few details. There was no photo and no name. And it doesn't worry you that Bridget will never know her father because he's anonymous?
No, I don't think it... That's the point of donor insemination. That is the point of why I'm going up there, because I haven't found a partner and I don't really need to know the partner. She doesn't need to know the partner or her donor.
Her donor also decided he wanted it that way. He agreed to donate sperm on the condition it was anonymous. In Victoria, Western Australia, New Zealand and the UK, that's now illegal. Only men willing to be identified need apply. But in New South Wales and most other states, although the industry's licensing body forbids it, as Four Corners will reveal, some clinics are still using anonymous donor sperm.
Unfortunately, it means that without legislation, every month, year that goes on, we are getting more people who are being born without rights and without, protection for their identity. And I think that's it's a tragic situation, and it really underlies the urgency of getting national legislation.
Sally McGreal is returning to Albury in New South Wales because she doesn't want Bridget to be an only child.
Really, when you're going up to have this sort of thing done, I don't really have an expectation. You just have to be very relaxed and see what the outcome can be or will be.
The 41-year-old woman has been given 6 donors to choose from. What sort of details did you get on the donor? What sort of things did they tell you?
Mainly your height, your eye colour, weight, origin, being Australian. I think that what they've done, are they married? Do they have children? Their present or current job, and their academic ability.
Okay, have a seat.
Hi Sally,
How are
feeling?
you? Good.
Now, just let you know you had 11 eggs today.
According to Sally McGreal's documentation, only 2 of the 6 donors were willing to be identified. Anonymous donors are no longer supposed to be used in Australia, according to the licensing body, the Reproductive Technology Accreditation Committee. But some clinics interpret the RTAC rules differently.
It's a recommendation, it's not a mandatory requirement.
It's just a guideline.
Exactly, exactly.
And guidelines are not set in law, are they?
No, they're not. But RTAC has, in order for clinics to be accredited, they have mandatory, recommended requirements. So some of them are mandatory and they're not negotiable, but with respect to donor sperm, it is definitely a recommendation but not a requirement.
Ruth Keat is wrong. It's a condition of accreditation. However, clinics who lose RTAC accreditation can still operate. Ruth Keat initially denied her clinic was still using unidentifiable donors. Later, however, she admitted the clinic must have offered Sally McGreal sperm from anonymous donors recruited in Queensland. Accredited clinics have been given until January 2006 to comply.
There are people out there who are happy to donate and be identified down the track if they're fully informed about, what sort of protections there are for them and what it means.
I just need to check a few details then. Can you just tell me your full name and address, please?
In New South Wales, Queensland, Tasmania, the Northern Territory and the Australian Capital Territory, where there's no legislation, the RTAC Code of Practice is the only thing regulating the donor industry. And obviously there's nothing compelling the donor either to respect these rules.
At the moment we're recruiting only donors that are willing to be identified in principle. There's no, mandatory requirement on them to do that, and they may well change their minds. But at the moment, that's definitely what we're looking for, and we ask them in principle to agree to that, yes.
But there's no guarantees there?
There's no guarantee.
But Albury also still uses unidentifiable donors. What's your view on that?
Well, I'm very concerned about that. I think many of the patients are too now.
Many studies show that most donor-conceived children want to know who their donor is. And some of those want to meet him. But that's not something that really concerns Sally McGreal.
I would have thought that if you are happy with your existence as is, and your mother and your upbringing, that you wouldn't feel that need to go searching because everything you have around you is fulfilled.
If Bridget, at the age of 8 or 10 or 15, says, I really have to know who my dad is, my biological dad, she won't be able to find out. I think that's a concern for her.
When you think about it, for the parent, it would probably be a little bit disturbing because she'd be wondering what she hasn't done correctly or what she hasn't provided. Why would she want to chase that information?
But history shows that even the most loved and well-adjusted of children can still have a desperate longing to know who their donor is. Twins Helen Edel and Anne Smee went on a 20-year detective hunt for their biological father.
I dreamed and fantasised about what my biological father would be like. You used to walk down the street, you look at people's faces, you always wonder. It's a natural phenomenon to want to know where you're from.
It was not until the sisters were 20 they discovered they were donor conceived.
My mother remarried and their stepfather said to us, he's not your father, he's not your father, in the heat of an argument. Back in the 1960s, it just didn't happen. People wouldn't have, religious conservative right-winger people would have been shocked to hear that men were donating their sperm. We got the shock of our lives, you know, all of a sudden finding out this so-called father that brought us up, even he really wasn't our father. You know, and we thought, oh my God, well then who are we? Where do we come from? And we'd look in the mirror.
In 1959, the twins' mother was desperate to have children, but her husband was infertile.
Well, her sister, who was a doctor, had a friend at Balmain Hospital and said, look, I know this doctor, gynaecologist, obstetrician, that might be able to help you out. And she organised a meeting with him.
The sisters were born in March 1960, but didn't know until 1980 they were donor conceived. When they did learn the family secret, it fuelled a desperate desire to know more. Who was their biological father? Did they look like him? Were there any genetic illnesses in his family? They asked their mother for more information.
In those days, the sperm was fresh. So who was the man whose fresh sperm, you know? Who was he? Did you see him? Did you walk into the room? What happened? What happened? You know?
All their mother could tell them was that she visited the Balmain Hospital and the name of the specialist that treated her. His name was Dr. John Doherty.
I rang up the doctor, myself personally, and said, is there any possible chance I could have a photo of our biological father? He got upset and a bit irate and said, don't be ridiculous, and screamed at me and said goodbye. She got terribly upset because he had no inkling that this was our whole meaning in our life, and how dare he, you know, dismiss us as if we're being frivolous. I was very upset. I couldn't stop crying. I must have cried all day for one day and then put it all to rest for 20 years.
The sisters' search hit a brick wall. They tried to get on with their lives, married and started families of their own. But they never lost that longing to know who their biological father was.
Helen didn't feel that she could be settled, neither could Anne. I mean, they're very alike as identical twins will be. And for both of them, there was just this missing piece of life's jigsaw puzzle. And it was important to them to finish the puzzle.
3 years after discovering they were donor conceived, the sisters persuaded their mother to ask Dr. Doherty for any records he'd kept. Then Anne Smee followed up with a letter.
Well, my sister wrote a letter to Dr. Doherty asking, you know, have you got a photograph? Just a photograph or a bit of history of who he might be, of where we came from. You know, we don't really want to meet him, we just want a photograph or a bit of background to our DNA. That's all we're asking for.
To the sisters' amazement, Dr. Doherty wrote back a detailed description of the anonymous donor.
He is fourth-generation Australian, black hair, brown eyes, about 5 feet 10 inches, olive skin and medium build. Physically, he was considered to be a ruggedly good-looking young man with a squarish face and good teeth when he laughed. He was quite athletic.
But the doctor refused to release the donor's name or any medical history other than to say the man was also a doctor.
You weren't after a father figure?
No, we weren't after a father figure because we had our other father raised us. Yeah, it's just curiosity more than anything to see what you look like, to where you're from. Just interesting to see who made you. Dear Anne, your mother wrote to me recently, so I was quite pleased to hear from you. The donor was a very bright young doctor who has since become a successful specialist in experimental medicine, so the IQ part is quite okay.
The sisters read the letter over and over again, thinking this would be the most they'd ever learn about their donor father.
It was something that was fairly consuming, I think, for both of them, because it wasn't just a flighty thing. It really meant everything to them to know the story and to know what the answers were.
Cup of tea, everyone? Great.
It would be another 20 years before they'd get to the bottom of the mystery. In 2003, they read about a support group for donor-conceived children.
We showed them our letter, and then they said, gee, that letter looks funny.
He talked about his academic abilities, his profession, his teeth, interestingly. And I thought to myself, how could a doctor know how the donor's teeth were 20 years later? I listened to the letter and I very, very carefully said to them in a very gentle way, have you ever thought that the doctor could be the donor?
What did they say?
There was silence at the other end of the phone. It was like I'd landed a bomb in her lap. And I said to her that some doctors were donors.
Now the sisters were on a mission to find the truth. The first thing they wanted to know was what Dr. John Doherty looked like. And did he look like them? They went to the medical library at Sydney University and looked through the yearbooks for his picture.
We looked at photos to see if we could see pictures of ourselves.
And what did you see staring back at you from the pages?
Someone that looked like us.
But the twins couldn't be certain that John Doherty was their father. By this time, he'd long retired and left Sydney, and his trail seemed to end there.
We still had no proof, so I knew that, we were on our way to solving the puzzle, but we weren't there yet. Now we had to work out, was this true? So that's when we tried to locate Dr. Doherty. So we did a bit of research on the internet, and I traced Dr. Doherty to Balmain Hospital. Then I traced him here to practice in St Ives. We researched on the net and painstakingly tracked his career.
They traced him to a small country town in New South Wales, and they telephoned every Doherty in the area until they finally found the doctor's wife in a retirement home.
Oh, started to get a few butterflies in the tummy, started to think, well, maybe we're coming to an end.
Helen Edel spoke to his wife only to be told the bad news. Dr. Doherty had died 10 years earlier. The women were devastated. They thought they would never learn the truth.
Maybe it wasn't him, maybe it was another man. So we're not sure, we're not sure yet.
What they discovered was that Dr. Doherty had a son. They potentially had a half-brother, but how would they ever know?
Helen rang up what would have been our biological half-brother and asked him would he consent to a DNA test. I was very nervous because, this strange person ringing up saying, look, we think Dr. Doherty might be our father. Well, he was shocked, equally as shocked, to think, well, he's got two half-sisters running around. I told him how we were, really trying to find some meaning in our life, and would you agree? I said, look, we don't want any money. All we want to do is a picture, a bit of medical record. Would you agree to a DNA test?
Incredibly, the son did agree, and the result was conclusive. The DNA test showed that Dr. John Doherty was their genetic father.
I feel great because I know who I am and where I'm from. So it was a great end to the 20-year secret. There it was. There was the answer. You know, after all those years of not knowing where we came from. And, excuse me, so all of a sudden the whole meaning in our lives came back.
I think all credit to her for persevering, and the same to Anne, that they weren't going to give up. They were just going to keep at it until they got the answers. And once they got the answers, it was good. They could put it to rest. It wasn't going to be something that would continue to be consuming their lives.
The twins only met their genetic half-brother once. After helping them put the final piece of the puzzle together, he declined further contact. He also declined to speak to Four Corners.
He got worried about his family and his reputation. So I think now he regrets that he consulted to the DNA test because it's his father. You can understand his perspective too. It was his dad.
Dr. Doherty breached good clinical practice by donating his sperm to a patient and not telling them. But there were no medical ethics for donor conception in 1959. The twins believed Dr. Doherty was well-intentioned and were only upset that he'd kept it a secret all his life. What do you think motivated Dr. Doherty to donate his own sperm?
I think deep down he wanted to help women that desperately wanted to have children, but really he didn't really think it out and didn't really think of the bigger picture. So the little procedure was performed. Now it was a waiting game.
The sisters wonder if Dr. Doherty had donated his sperm to other women. Potentially they could have more half-brothers and sisters.
How many people did Dr. Doherty artificially inseminate? How many women? And I mean, if people donate lots of sperm, well, how? Yeah, you could walk around and you could be making love to your half-brother or half-sister. I mean, it's bizarre. It worries us a little bit that we always make jokes. There could be half a dozen other people walking out there with a similar DNA, and what would happen if they met one of our children? Sometimes you're attracted to people that look like yourself. You know, they've done studies. I think there should be like a national register of people that are going to donate their sperm. There should be medical histories, their record, so that could avoid that happening.
Many doctors believe a national register is needed for any children conceived in the future with donor sperm.
I think that those things are really important from an accountability point of view, and they provide security for everybody in the system. They provide security for the donor to know that his donations are going to be used ethically. They provide security for the parents who can raise the child and be open and honest, knowing that the questions that come up will have answers.
One of the most common criticisms of central registers and using only identifiable donors is that fewer men will donate sperm. But Professor Gab Kovacs at Monash IVF in Melbourne has worked with the Victorian Register and used only identifiable donors for years, and he's seen no shortage of sperm as a result. What's the advantage, do you think, of a national registry?
Well, at least it would cover people going from state to state. It would also give us statistics on a national level, which are hard to get at the moment. And again, it would register donors so that donors would be on the same system.
But some in the fertility industry don't want a central register. Professor Douglas Saunders, chair of the industry's licensing body for the last 5 years, wouldn't support any moves for a national register.
Are there any records recording who donor children are in Australia and how many there are? And you're not concerned about that?
No, not particularly, no.
Why aren't you concerned that we don't know who they are?
Because it's impractical. We don't live in a police state.
Doug's entitled to his opinion. I've worked in Victoria under Victorian law, and we can work with it and we can see where it's coming from, and I believe it could be used nationally without unnecessarily restricting the freedom of people in other states.
Do you think there should be national records where we know where people know who and how many donor-conceived children there are in Australia?
I think the Australian people would not agree to that. That would be a huge invasion of privacy.
Why would it be an invasion of privacy to have medical records documenting who's donor-conceived? Why would that be an invasion of privacy?
Well, would you want everything about you in some big database in Canberra?
I think it is extraordinary that, we're in the 21st century and records as fundamental as those about a person's identity have no security, and we don't even know if they're being kept.
Victoria passed legislation almost 20 years ago making central registers mandatory. The records are kept by a state government body, the Infertility Treatment Authority, and can only be accessed with the consent of all parties.
It's important to know who you're related to and that you're not forming a relationship with someone who may be a half-sibling. I think it's a really sort of central part of understanding who you are as a person.
Four Corners has found cases of donor-conceived children meeting socially and not knowing they're related. On Sydney's North Shore, there were two full siblings, a brother and sister, the result of embryo transplants, growing up in separate families, but in the same neighbourhood. They were also believed to be at the same school. Four Corners believes neither children nor their parents knew of the situation. The children were conceived in the clinic that Professor Saunders was working in.
Do you find that a reason for concern?
I can't comment on that.
Why not?
It's too high. It's a question I don't know enough about.
Would it surprise you to learn that those recipients come from your clinic?
That they go to the same school, it wouldn't surprise me, no. It would not surprise me.
This man has no idea how many children he's helped create. He donated sperm 318 times from 1979 to 1992. Four Corners obtained a copy of his personal records detailing where and when he donated. He agreed to do an interview on the proviso he wasn't identified.
So you donated 318 times. How many offspring do you think there could be out there?
I wouldn't have a clue.
I think it's appalling, and I hate to think that that is something that has happened commonly. I would be extremely surprised if it has. But
how would we know?
Well, unfortunately, we can't know.
Why do you think they might be concerned?
Well, a possibility of offspring running into each other and marrying, I suppose. But I think, the population that we've got, I think it's a hell of a long shot. But anyway.
So you're not concerned about any of your own offspring meeting and having a relationship?
Yeah, you would be a bit concerned, I suppose.
Is there a concern, though, if there's donor-conceived children out there, that they could be having relationships with their half-sisters?
With their half-sisters and brothers. This has always been brought up as a possibility, and if there ultimately are enough of them in a small enough population, this is going to happen. But nobody is going to know.
And one reason why no one would know is that doctors like Strawn Robertson deliberately didn't keep the names of donors to protect their anonymity. Dr. Robertson was one of the pioneers of donor conception in Australia. Almost 1,000 children were conceived through his private clinic in Macquarie Street, Sydney.
I've had a phone call at work or something, and so I'd have to say, look, I've got to just pop out for a cup of coffee or post a letter or something. So I'd have to tell my boss, look, I'm just going up the road from back shortly. And
throughout mostly the 1980s, this man donated 270 times at Dr. Strawn Robertson's clinic. He says he did it for some pocket money to support his wife and 4 daughters, as well as to help infertile couples.
So is it possible, though, at your own clinic at Macquarie Street that one person could donate 270 times?
Not the slightest, no.
Because he actually, I'll just show you the records he's got here. This is your clinic, Macquarie Street here. And that's the first page of records. So he actually said that he donated something like 270 times at that clinic. Well, those records show that. Could it be possible that he was donating and you were never aware of it?
No, he certainly he couldn't. He couldn't do that. We knew who we asked to donate.
Would you have had anyone donate that many times, do you think?
Well, I wouldn't be aware that it, but if you say that this is from somebody who said yes, he did, I'd be surprised. But that would be, if that's so, that's what you've said.
Advocates for donor-conceived children claim legislation like that in Victoria would prevent multiple donations from occurring.
In Victoria, it just couldn't happen.
Why not?
The legislation, the work of the Infertility Treatment Authority, there are guidelines. There is also the registers that have been set up.
So you know on the registers how many times people are donating yourself?
Certainly. So we can track how many offspring arise from a particular donor. So there would be, with that tracking mechanism, that situation just couldn't occur in Victoria.
Professor Douglas Saunders, the former head of obstetrics and gynaecology at Sydney University and now chair of the fertility industry's licensing body, has himself attracted criticism. Four Corners has obtained a copy of a letter written in 1997 where a family complains to Professor Saunders about his own clinic. The patient said she discovered her donor contributed to at least 11 families, although she'd been promised the clinic's limit was 10. Professor Saunders wrote back, "We're mindful of legislation in other states, but you would appreciate fixing a legal number is fraught with difficulties."
Well, this is because of some states have got a small population like Tasmania.
But this letter is about your own clinic. Why is it a problem at your own clinic?
It was tied up with the fact that some people wanted to have another child within the same family with the same donor.
But then why do your RTAC guidelines work if you say 10 families? If you can't stick to the guidelines or to the rules, why should anyone else be expected to be able to?
I don't...
Do you think...
We can only try. We can only try.
You can only try. Do you think, given instances like this, is RTAC the right body to be the watchdog over the industry?
I believe it has worked well over the years, and I still say this. There is no evidence that harm has been caused over the years.
How would we ever know? There's no records. How would we ever know?
Yes.
Many donor-conceived adults want an independent authority to monitor the industry. Four Corners has spoken to a former RTAC member who supports this, claiming the licensing body is often ineffective. This former RTAC member of your own committee says that there's often corporate amnesia when they come to inspecting clinics, that the real records, the truth isn't always declared.
Well, we do our very best. We are human, and we are not policemen. And
but isn't that just the point? You're not policemen. Shouldn't there be an independent watchdog?
I don't believe so.
You don't think there should be an independent watchdog?
Where's the evidence that something's gone wrong?
In the case of the man who donated sperm more than 300 times, there's no way of assessing what impact his actions will have. I know times have changed, but knowing what we know now, is that risky business, taking that many donations from one man?
Yes.
You wouldn't do it now?
No.
Why do you think you did it then?
I presume that we were unaware that the numbers were building up over time.
As well as donating at Dr. Strawn Robertson's practice, this man donated at 6 other clinics. At the Royal Prince Alfred Hospital, he donated 13 times, and 3 boys were born as a result. He also received a letter saying there could be more on the way. At the Royal Hospital for Women in Paddington, he donated 9 times.
I've looked at the piece of paper that records the dates of his donations and where he made them. And that man donated at the Royal Hospital for Women around the time that I was conceived.
So what does that all mean?
It means that potentially I could be the result of somebody donating 300 times and not knowing how many children he's been responsible for.
But Geraldine Hewitt may never know if the multiple donor is her father, as her donor's records were destroyed. She believes everyone has the right to know where they biologically come from. Her only hope of knowing her donor's details is if he signs onto a voluntary register at the Royal Women's Hospital in Sydney.
I would like my donor to provide me with his medical history, perhaps a photograph of him at my age, 22, and I'd like him to tell me why he donated and perhaps some things about him. Does he like crazy music like my dad? Does he love reading like I do? What motivates him and inspires him?
I guess everyone would like to know their roots. They'd like to know a little bit about their genetic background. It's even if it's just for medical reasons or whatever. But it's basically just putting another piece in the puzzle of her identity. So she's not looking for a father. She's just looking to find information about the person that is her genetic father.
They're really soft and
Yeah, they are, aren't they?
we should see if we can get some red and white flowers for Liz and Ken today.
Donor conception raises questions about what constitutes a family and what it is to be a father.
Warren, have you got some money?
Yeah, I've got some money. Yeah.
Okay.
Do you want a red one?
Yeah, one red one. Yeah. These are for Sydney.
Warren Hewitt questioned his ability to be a husband after discovering he was infertile a few years after getting married.
At the time, I was absolutely devastated.
He said that he left work, walked around the city, had no idea where he went, came home and told my mum what the doctor had told him and offered her a divorce.
Because most of the time, most people I'd say would, when they, all through their life, they just grow up thinking, oh yeah, I'll have kids, and it's just a natural progression in life. And when you're told something like that, it is a bit of it comes as quite a shock.
You look like you get a lot.
Do they have an odour? Sort of.
After recovering from the news, Warren Hewitt convinced his wife Leonie they should try donor conception. They now have 3 children from 3 different donors.
We believe that they should know about how they were conceived from a very early age so that they could grow up with that information, and it's not, they don't sort of reach 21 and you suddenly hit them with this blockbuster of a piece of information that I'm not really your genetic father, someone else actually helped to conceive you.
I found out about the way that I was conceived when I was 5.5. My mum and dad sat me down.
Basically, you explained the facts of life with her, and that's how children are conceived in most families. But this is another way of conceiving a family or creating a family. And another man, another kind man, helped us by giving his semen and fertilised mummy's egg. And she sort of thought about it for a little while, and she sort of said, we should give that man a present.
Warren Hewitt says his role as a father was never threatened by his children wanting to know more about their donors. His family has led a campaign for years fighting for the rights of donor-conceived children.
I cannot think that I could possibly love my kids any more if they were genetically related to me. To me, I don't even really think of them as being not genetically related to me. To me, they're my kids, and that's the way they've been, and that's the way they always will be.
I don't think that I could ever put it into words how much I love my dad. I don't think that anything would do him justice, or I think that he's just a wonderful man, and I think that I've been given a wonderful gift to be born to my mum and my dad.
But not everyone believes donating sperm is a gift. Michael Linden was a donor about 25 years ago.
I only did it out of a sense of adventure and you know...
Just for the $10?
And for the $10. The $10 came in handy, yeah. In those days, I guess, you know, it was quite a bit of money. Everyone that's ever lived in the house has left stuff behind. So.
Out the back.
No,
Michael Linden is now the spokesperson for Tangled Webs, a group calling for a ban on all donor conception.
Retouching all their... Like every single colour of car they've got, I've got.
Oh, okay.
Since finding 2 of his donor-conceived children, including 24-year-old Miff Walker, he believes the only true father is a genetic one. Father and daughter now regularly see each other.
It needs to be recognised that what you're actually doing is giving away a potential child, because you're donating your sperm.
Giving away a child? Well, he's not. Yeah, you're not giving away a child. He's giving away semen, really.
Why isn't a social father good enough?
Because he's not the real father. To my mind, he's not the real father.
Donors, as well as their children, should have rights, according to Michael Linden. In Victoria from July next year, donors will be able to contact their offspring that are turning 18. The state law provides for contact where there's consent by both parties.
I think it's a good thing that, especially for those donors that have changed their mind about 18 years, a lot can happen in a lifetime in 18 years, that they may have changed their mind. They might have curiosity about those children. They might now consider them to be their children, as I would.
One problem is studies show most of these children have never been told by their parents that they are donor-conceived.
You know, it's been said to be it would be a traumatic thing for that person to find out that way, but I think better that than that they never find out.
Could it be the case that a letter arrives at the doorstep of a donor-conceived child and this is the first time they learn about their origins?
Certainly, as I mentioned before, administrative processes have not been set in concrete, and whether letters are used or what the process is for communication, that hasn't been set at the moment.
Probably will be traumatic for them. You know, if they have no idea and they're suddenly got this piece of information dumped on them, you know, that can be a severe blow, because it's a total change in how they perceive themselves as a person.
Why would you want to contact those other 3 children?
Because they're my children. And I want to know who they are and I want them to know who I am.
Many families believe donor conception has been a gift.
I love Geraldine. I guess the expression when they're little kids, you say, "I love you the whole wide world," and that still applies.
There will always be some who see it as an ill-conceived social experiment. But most agree on one thing. There should be laws in all states to protect the rights of the children.
Well, they need to change the laws, because when they're not looking at the offspring's right. They're called human rights and everybody has them.
This is the only life that I know. It is a gift, and I think that I would, if I had the chance to write a letter to my donor, I would really just be wanting to say thank you. Whatever reasons he felt compelled to donate, it's irrespective. I got to be born into a family that love me and they care for me, and I love them too.